Dear friends, and a salute to all. I am very much happy to see you all. Now I share some views of agrarian crisis in India. I am an activist. Now I am the state president of AIKM, the All India Kisan Mahasaba, Tamilnadu. And at the same time, I am the National Council member of AIKM. All India Kisan Mahasaba was run by Communist Party of India Marxist-Leninist Liberation. Dear friends, we are going to discussion about very important subject of the present farmer struggle and capital of India and the Indian democracy. In September amid the coronavirus pandemic, the Indian government passes three laws deregulating the agriculture sector in India. They do so without consulting any farmers, associations, organizations anywhere in the country. One wonders about the urgency to push at such an uncertain time when the economy is in recession and the pandemic not yet over. Besides the fact that the bills were passed through deception and trickery without any parliamentary committees and rules having been constituted, actual voting and public debate notwithstanding, the laws in themselves are more harmful than beneficial to the farmers who they claim to have been made for. And January 12, the Supreme Court stayed the implementation of the centers from laws till further notice and constituted an expert committee which was to take inputs from all the relevant stockholders regarding the protests and the farmers' concerns. This committee was not with opposition form. The farmers' unions, as all those on the committee, had publicly supported the farm laws. And one of the four members of the committee eventually backed out. We are yet to know what the findings of this committee have been so far. The government claimed it held extensive discussions on farm laws, but there is no evidence on the ground. Agriculture and trade state subjects, but the states were not consulted before passing the bills. The people for whom the bills have been made, the farmers and their unions, were not consulted. Farmers have refused to end the protest till farm laws are repealed. The Rajya Sabha passed the bills on September 20, 2020, overriding rules. Opposition MPs and demanded that the two contentious bills be examined by a select committee of the House. The president gave his assent to the bills a day after. The leader of the opposition met him and handed over a representation saying that the bills had been passed unconstitutionally and they should be returned for further consideration, even as the farmers were protesting in their own states. Now, I will say a few words about Indian democracy was viewed by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. That Ambedkar is a radical democrat. Ambedkar ideology, I say, he was a stanch Indian nationalist. He was totally against any separatist movement. Second, in Solapur, he advised the oppressed class people that Bhakti movement will not solve their problems. He was totally against linguistic chauvinism and regionalism. He wanted every Indian to learn and use Hindi, and till all Indians adapt it, he wanted English to continue. And he was a socialist, but a democratic socialist. He wanted all industries to be a public sector and extended the concept of agricultural cooperation also. And he was totally committed to constitution framed by fully democratic elections without any discrimination based on religion, caste, language, and race. He insisted on the rule of law. He wanted clear separation of legislative, judiciary, and military. He was against the legislature passing laws with, which affect the fundamental rights of any group. And he taught that the judiciary has power to strike down any law if it is found to go against the directive principles of state policy. He gave least importance to the military and stipulated that the military is meant for defense against external aggressors and should not be used in internal strife. He was totally against violent agitation, was a firm believer in individual liberty. He considered that scheduled castes need reservation in basic education, higher education, government services, and advocated positive discrimination to uplift the SC people. He demanded that there must be a dual electoral system so that SC people can elect their own choice of leaders. He thought that casteism and untouchability are bound up closely with Hindu religion and so wanted the SC people to adopt another religion. He wanted that religion to have originated in India, like Jainism, Buddhism, and Sikhism. He was approved and organized the trade union. He was against the Stalinist Soviet Union. The Stalinist Soviet Union, as he believed in democracy, he was practiced. And Western countries like USA, England, and Western Europe. He believed in uniform code irrespective of religion and wanted the state activities to be secular. He wanted intercaste and interreligion marriages so that casteism, untouchability, and religious intolerance can be done away with. He was for partition because he believed that Muslims will dominate and intimidate Demit Hindus and will stand in the way of India becoming a modern nation. He was not anti-communism, but he disliked communists as they were Stalinists. Had no agreement with either Jinnah or Evira, that is Periyar in Tamil Nadu, as both of them were separatists, and while Jinnah was a more Muslim fundamentalist, Evira was a materialistic atheist. He was against linguistic organization of states of India. He was not an active proponent of land reforms, land to the tiller, and land redistribution to help the Indies agricultural laborers. Let us now point what the weak points in this way. Universal adult Francis, irrespective of language, race, religion, caste, and gender, is real fine. But let us remember that it does not ensure that the Dalits will not get liberation from caste oppression. Why? Because for many centuries, the Dalits were agrarian bonded laborers, much like the Russian Tsarist and Tsarist Russia. The feudal class structure in rural India had kings, lords, mostly military chieftains, landlords of upper caste, rich and poor peasants, proprietors, and tenants of landlords, and all of them used the Dalit, both men and women, and landless labor and virtual slaves. In Tamil Nadu, there are main subgroups labeled as C. One group was actually poor peasants and not bonded labor. They were wrongly included in the list of scheduled castes by the British colonialists. Their number is very small, but they are all still poor peasants. They like in South Tamil Nadu district, the major groups of Dalits, even in Eastern and Western districts of Tamil Nadu, they are mostly landless agrarian labor. In Western Tamil Nadu, there is a third group who are most depressed and oppressed for hundreds of years, even from Sangam period. This has been the state policy. They were called the Kadesiyar. That is in Tamil Kadesiyar, we call. The lost in social hierarchy. They were very carefully settled outside the main village and surrounded by upper and middle caste Hindus. It was planned settlement by the feudal state, and in every village they are only about 15%. Their lot was to work for their masters, and there was a tune when they can be sold as cattle. Exact parallel occur in the history of USA too, especially in southern USA, in America states like Florida, Texas, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Georgia. The blacks were hunted from Africa by slave traders and brought to and sold to plantation labor in southern USA. Abraham Lincoln had to fight a civil war to abolish the system of bonded labor, but without education, they remained poor and exploited and abused. This is true even today in US. Just because here Obama was able to become president of USA, it does not mean that the blacks have become liberated in the tone sense. The Harris slum in New York is the exact equivalent to Dharavi slum in Bombay. For election purpose, theoretically the Dalits have vote, but it is not a vote to elect one of their own community, except when he is the candidate and the so-called liberal group. Thereafter, a Dalit can get power only when he gets support from section of the oppression community. Even in Uttar Pradesh, where Mayavadi has been a major force, her, her appointments and candidates were mostly from oppressing communities. Though she was a chief minister of such a big state, it was not a single meaningful land reform bill has been passed there, giving land ownership to details. It is a cruel deception. If we carefully analyze the caste background of AC legislators and UP Assembly over the past few decades, they are all formed from reserved consciences. Perhaps their lot is better than their brethren in BSP. Even in the recently concluded US election, the voting percentage is never anywhere near 75% seen. Even when they can vote by post, if there is this situation in most advanced and rich country like USA, how do we expect fair share for Dalits? The upper and middle class hooligans will prevent the Dalits from voting and will fill up the ballot box with bogus votes. This will happen in 1970 in Bihar, and that is in Phojpur, mainly in Phojpur. CPML gave the arms to the Dalits, and they went to go, they went to vote for their own votes. Sometimes they will destroy the ballot boxes before counting. They will do all kinds of fraud to change the result. The minister will order the collector and officials to do anything to conceal the true or result, even use the term. And no country of the world, the ideal of universal and free election has been success as far as the minority group is concerned. The reality is that the oppressed people are given a choice to choose either this or that Kunavan, both of whom are the ruling of the class. The only satisfaction for the slave is that a less tyrannical goon, slightly sympathetic to him, has been selected. Once the elections are over, for the next 4 or 5 years, they cannot do anything. If at all any reform occurs, it is more due to the advantage of section of the ruling class crumbs of the table. This is very advanced computer technology era. EVM, electronic voting machine, can be very, very easily manipulated. Ambedkar could not have foreseen such a development. He was an idealist dreamer. Was he defeated in his own place? Ambedkar did not have a solution in this problem. What this is a solution, as Dalits cannot with anywhere solely in their own numerical sense, how to form a united front with similar oppressed people from other communities. This can occur only in class basis and not caste basis, not caste basis. Dalits are poor peasants and landless labor mostly. Does it mean that there are no landless labor and poor peasant in other BC communities? Speaking from my state, Tamil Nadu, there are crores of landless laborers and poor peasants from other communities like Vanyas, Muklatos, Yadavas, and others. This only point is that those communities have very rich and super rich people of their caste also. The poor in those communities follow such rich leaders of caste pride and loyalty. In class terms, poor Dalits have dual oppression, being landless labor as well as the oppressed class. But the poor people in other castes are not oppressed class after land reforms. The rich peasants and middle peasants are from OBC, and due to the background, rural culture, are able to get the support of the poor peasants and landless labor of their own community. Without a sweeping and severe land reform to give sense to the landless of all communities and formation of the cooperatives. This can be done only by spreading the message of land reform. Land should be owned and by people who actually work in the field. These three standard acres in the ceiling. Dalits should learn to mix and mingle with the poor from the other communities and make them raise the demand for land reform. Dalit liberations also needs education and jobs. Poor people from OBC also need that. But the Supreme Court has mentioned in Mandal Commission case, the rich section of the OBC must be excluded from the benefits of reservation. The poor in OBC should be shown that it is the richer section and the community that is scrapping all the benefits of education and jobs. The same rule applies to Dalit families also. Ambedkar democracy put too much faith in the judiciary. Courts from the local through high courts and the Supreme Court are within the control of the ruling powers. No one then the judges deliver four judgments and fair judgments careful not to have this or that group of ruling classes. And as the saying goes, justice delayed is justice denied. How can I, a poor man framed by the state, find the financial and other resources to fight his case in Supreme Court? Kobalagas Naidu, Kilavenmani fame, was acquitted. How many criminals have been punished for atrocities on Dalits? Do we not find retired Chief Justice being appointed as governor or Rajya Sabha member? If the ruling powers are fascist, can a dissenting judge say goons will attack, maim, and kill him? Take the case of Karitwas, a gang rape in Uttar Pradesh. See the discussion way that district administration and police behave. This is a harsh reality. Now you are going to see the farmers movement. And the development in the former movement or a lesson about the inadequacy of the mechanical understanding of constitution and electoral democracy in India, and the need for rethinking about Ambedkar's stand on rule of law alone. Who makes a law? And any elections for state assembly and parliament assembly, the average voting percentage is about 66%. So one third of the electorate does not vote at all. The rich families generally do not bother to come to voting booth to vote. It's very likely find that very poor and depressed class people also either uninterested or prevented from voting at the risk of physical injury. So the contest is only between one, two, or three sections of the OBC. In class terms, They are rich peasants, middle peasants, poor peasants, and landless labor of the OBC. Moreover, people know that whoever wins is not going to make much change in the list. They vote for their caste and for money. It is common knowledge that voters are openly bribed. The parties get huge funds from rich industries and even from foreign companies as election fund. Goons threaten the super rich such as contractors, mine owners, real estate thugs, liquor barons, stock exchange, hamblers, film financiers, and such antisocial elements. Election time is eagerly awaited by mercenary criminal gangs who are ready to do anything for the highest bidder. Common people, especially in rural areas, are primarily influenced by caste loyalties, cinema influence, and money feast, and the liquor festival, and election day. On top of all this, the BC section has their panchayats. These cow panchayats are sort of extra constitutional organizations. They openly declare that no legislation and law is more binding on them than the decision of their cow. Invariably, it is the rich peasants of the area who controlled their crops with their money and muscle power and cast loyalty of middle peasants, poor peasants, and landless labor and odd jobs, laborers of their respective castes. People who live in urban center and industrial areas cannot really understand the age-old hold of such crop over the minds of the OBC in India's 25. The depressed classes have so much crop organization because they lack numerical strength and financial resources. Each village has a caste composition of rich and middle peasants and poor peasants, landless agricultural labor, and non-agricultural depressed communities have an option except to follow to know the states of the cap. This is the reality. What was the view of Ambedkar on the reality of Dalits being a minority in every village, 50% only, and surrounded by caste Hindus and made to live in their own hamlet with a lot of social restriction? What solution did he have? Nothing much. He was alive only for a few years after independence, 1947 to 44. In the first few years after independence, he did very good work in law minister in Nehru cabinet and had full support of Jawaharlal Nehru. After he resigned from Nehru's cabinet, became increasingly ineffective due to poor health, wrong ideology, and failure to understand the mood of the people in his own state, Maharashtra. As a minister, he did wonderful works because this was not very much difference between Nehru and Ambedkar. So far as issues like industrialization, public sector reservation for Dalits, strong central government secularism, and abolition of supersection through education, development of agriculture through giant irrigation projects, and cooperative farming. The blunder him that he was too hasty and did not realize that Nehru was actually in a minority among the colleagues in the Congress party. Though he was a towering personality among the people all over India, Ambedkar was not and was at best confined to Maharashtra. More surprising, Nehru's Congress was built on the alliance at grassroots level of Muslims, Dalits, and progressive provinces. My father is also a congressman at the time of 1950 to 60. So even in these years, he was against the reactionary UP Brahmins, backward class support, pro-left policies, careful grooming of second-rank land and leaders. Ambedkar was not a much mass leader Nehru was really a mass leader. Being a Stalin follower, Nehru was against feudal zamindars and landlords only. He knew that importance of rich peasants, middle peasants, and poor peasants in a village of India. The OBC, mostly tenant cultivators in British India, Nehru abolition of zamindari system and the reform of tenancy laws made Congress very popular among the OBC even. In states like Punjab, he left the entire things to leaders like Pratap Singh. He is a congressman. Pratap Singh Khairon. And in every state, he chose and supported most leaders who would follow his understanding of international developments, pro-left stance, and step-by-step social reform carefully and gradually breaking the emotional bondage of poor peasants and landless labor to rich peasants of their own caste in every village. It was also very meticulous to enlist the support of a progressive section of forward communities because the social reality in India is that people still respect people from forward communities with progressive outlook. Forward communities include Brahmins, Reddis, Kayasas. Noteworthy features even today is that every party in West Bengal has Brahmin leaders. It is easy to forget that such corp panchayats are grassroots democracy rather than once in 5 years state and general election. When such grassroots democracy is progressive, it will be absolutely great and is capable of even throwing state and central governments. But it is a VC caste domination, grassroots democracy in which the Dalits and the poor sections of the VC have no voice. The Jat or caste-based community, there are Hindus, Sikhs, Muslims in the Jat corps, no place for Dalits. It is a good thing that in the present former cycle, the Bharat Kishan Union of Tikites is playing a progressive role because it is rallying against the upper caste domination of BJP, the Gurs, Brahmins, and the numerically strong Yadavas, middle and rich peasants. It's good that the struggle is spreading in Western UP nearer to Delhi and having a large percentage of Muslims. Muzaffarnagar used to be a strong leftist central long back. The Green Revolution brought great prosperity of the farmers of Punjab and Haryana. Automation with the tractors made them stronger. Many George Sikhs migrated to Western countries like Canada. Invariably, the OBC, rich and middle peasants are regionalist and in most cases, even separatists, they are not too reluctant to accept Western ideas. This is dilemma for Dalits and left movements. If they antagonize the middle peasants, they cannot even enter a village to spread progressive idea of socialism. If they compromise with the clerks and middle peasants, they can ask nothing for the poor and land. The left movement solution is replacing COP with Kishan unions. The COP is a caste union. In every community, including the Brahmins, the majority of the people are poor, comprised to more in their own community. Once the poor-rich divide is realized by the poor in every community, it gets much health, class orientation, though most Dalits are landless, agrarian laborers. It should be remembered that the OBC also has a lot of landless labor. So the right way to bring both the Dalit and OBC landless laborer into the class-oriented All India Kishan organization on specific demand of radical land reform. That is very important. What is the radical land reform? The first, I would say that no family should own more than 300 acres. Second, no family should employ tenant cultivator. Third, all peasants should be and would be registered landowners. There will be no classes, landless agrarian labor. And fourth, all peasants will be the members of agricultural cooperatives. And fifth, the peasants should not have the right to sell or pledge their land to anyone and at any time. Such a Kisan union and progressive only will solve the problem of Dalit oppression. I think that the AIKM may do this like the Kisan union progressively in India, so that I am functioning in that All India Kisan Mahasabha and break the cost-based leadership. This is a very much important idea that the caste-based leadership of the clerks and rich peasants over the poor peasants and landless labor of their own community. The poverty of Dalits can be solved by this program, but this is not a permanent solution. Population of India 1950 was 37 crores. In 2020, the population of India is nearly 140 crores. Without food security, no nation can be really free from imperialist blackmail. The green revolution that we gives the improved irrigation, fertilizer, crop rotation, and high yielding variety seeds made India self-sufficient in food grains. This was a contribution of Nadu. He was submitted a report of support minimum sale price of food grains in Good Corporation of India. When there is excess production, price will go down and the peasantry will be adversely affected. The state and central governments procured food grains and distribute them to urban population and working class in factories. We have to play a remunerative prices to the peasant cultivated and at the same time ensure that food items are available at low prices to urban people and factory laborers. Naturally, the system has to be subsidized. A good part of the general tax income has to be used for subsidy. Free market economy without government active role in this activity is not good. Agrarian capitalists, super rich, will procure from poor peasants, hold them in their private godowns, and artificially take the price in free markets. They will expect the food grains in to any country that gives them super profit. Common people, even the middle class, will not be able to pay the high price. Poor workers will starve even to death. So it is their responsibility and the government to play a good price to peasant cultivators and sell them cheap in the ration shops to poor people at low price. The government may also low cost canteen. And the long small patches without road facilities reach the village and good transport will affect the peasantry. There are vagaries of monsoon, floods, monsoon failure. Sometimes hybrid seeds give very good yield for the first 2 or 3 years. And by imperialist conspiracy, the land becomes totally barren. The peasants need loan for meeting the cultivation expenses. Before nationalization of banks by Indira Gandhi period, the peasants used to borrow money from the local money lenders, pledging their land as security. When there is a crop failure, the land was attached by the money lender by court order. After bank nationalization, the peasant can get bank loan for cultivation. This they were saved uh, from losing their land to the money lenders, from the money lenders. The state introduced the crop insurance also so that peasants will be compensated for loss due to the crop loss by floods, excess rains, and drought. All these are progressive measures. Where will the money come from? By direct and indirect taxation. When the rural people get social harvest, a good harvest, and good surplus amount to spend, they will to be a buyers for consumer goods. The consumer industry will then thrive and provide job openings without heavy industry. and medium industry. The consumer industry cannot get low raw materials and raw materials of their inputs. This is why Ambedkar and Nehru always gave top importance to laying the foundation of industrial development. And this is by the government as under Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal. This was for to solve the problem of the unemployment. Automation by tractors will make the landless labor unnecessary in agriculture. Dalit labor will be affected most. Even poor patients and marginal patients will be reduced to the state of landless labor. And there is no industrial development to give them jobs. They are forced to become migrant labor and in big cities mostly as an unorganized labor. Exploited by contractors who them as no better than slaves. When there is pandemic and lockdown period, it is this poor population who gave to walk literally 1,000 miles with all this mega luggage back to their village, where also this is no job or food. To avoid this tragedy, the government introduced a scheme for minimum wage during lean period in agriculture, also food security bill. Education solve this problem? Yes or no? What is the use of degree without a job? The future of Dalit youth should not be tied up in their rural patch of lands. They should get skill in technology, especially small scale, consumer industry and medium industry. Special schools known as the technology high school were opened by some industries after forming. After finishing that, they joined the polytechnics and the engineering colleges. Schools such as students were better equipped in technology. Punjab and Haryana do not huge any very big industries, but there are hundreds of medium and small scale industries. Technical skills will enable them to be self-employed also. These are the progressive directions should be taken by the government. We should be give topmost priority to defeat the Modi anti-Amit Shah government. The first point is I'm saying that they are pinning to allow corporate, mostly American, to enter the agriculture scene in India. They will play the same rule as moneylenders in Burma and Ceylon in the 1920 and 1940 period. They will they will convert the rich villages into giant farms and drive out even the rich peasants from the granaries of India. Maybe they increase production, but will use it for export only. The local big business will also do that. They will hold the finish of the public distribution system. They have money power and will not need the government to incur subsidy expenses. India will not then aim to become a welfare state. There will be artificially created scarcity of food grain only over big business companies who earn 1 lakh per day in share market prospect. The middle class even will be affected. All the public sector assets will be privatized. The bank will once again become bankrupt and many more evils. The fellows will waste public money in ornaments industry and justify that wage was against neighboring countries. All these are typical nasty methods. The only difference being Germany was already a developed nation, but their face is turned by Indian government to make it junior partner in the board games of USA, Europe, and Anglo warmonger. People of India will have to face huge destruction and once again become a slave country. It is a good thing that rich peasants are daring to challenge the fascist goons without forgetting the class interests of poor peasants and landless laborers. The Kisan Association must participate in the peasant revolt, particularly exploiting the poor peasants and making freely with the very poor of all communities. Rest the leadership of the movement from the Kulak lobby and get the support of middle peasants, poor peasants, and landless labor and unorganized labor. The most important point is that we should not allow anarchy elements, separatists, CA agents to infiltrate in this struggle field. We should expect the state to unleash violence sooner or later and equip that the protesters to be prepared or self-defense. In my
Okay.
joint action with the rich peasants, we should perform put forward concrete plans for the benefit of landless labor and poor peasants without allowing caste overtones. Speak for the poor peasants and landless labor of all the castes. Let them fight our battle. The Dalits also will gain. Build caste solidarity in class basis, not caste basis. You must be divide the backward community. That's goons and hooligans that be divided by class struggle. So Ambedkarism cannot do that. See how Mayavadi and Paswan are behaving. See how Ramdas Advale is behaving. See how Pudhiya Dhammalang is behaving. Thank you, comrades.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Comrade Simpson. It was a good talk. Uh, and uh, so, as I understand from this talk, it has always been a complex equation between the class and the caste, and it's always challenging to understand and uh, understand the finer details. And this talk will definitely help us to understand more finer details of how the caste system uh, and the class dynamics play an important role in this agriculture industry as a whole, uh, and how we should be building the solidarity across all the class and the caste segments. So before moving on to Q&A, we would like to thank all our co-sponsors. Uh, uh, the co-sponsors for this session is the first one is Ambedkar King Study Circle, Boston South Asian Coalition, Coalition of Seattle Indian Americans, Global Indians Progressive Alliance, India Civil Watch International, Indian American Muslim Council, International Solidarity for Academic Freedom in India, UK, Hindus for Human Rights, Humanism Project Australia, Periyar International, Voices Against Fascism in India, USA. Thank you all. And yeah, I already saw some of the hands getting raised up. Uh, yeah, I guess to start with, I think it's Raj Sahai. You can start asking your question.
Okay. Thank you, Comrade Simpson. My question is, I take it that with the description of class struggle that you have, you still support the farmers' movement that is presently as an organization, that is CPIML Liberation, as well as your union support. Then do I understand you support the farmers' protest movement against what I also consider as a fascist government in India? That's my question to you. And how do you separate the class question from the fact that it is the rich peasants who are leading, or at least this is my understanding, the peasant movement is led by rich peasants. Tekat was a supporter of BJP before, who's from UP, Western UP, and Tekat is identified as the leader of that protest movement, at least on the television, Indian television, that I see here from the United States. So could you please explain that, your position? How do you differentiate the class struggle from this present farmer struggle, and how do you support it?
The comment, and that is Kap Panchayat is a parallel constitutionally, that is unconstitutional, not unconstitutional. It's a parallel movement, that is against the central government, that is the fascist government. In this point, we support that one. But in villages and rural areas, this Kap Panchayat is completely oppressed the poor people and Dalits. And this scenario, but this time, total, that is agricultural form, totally this industries and the department, agriculture department, everything is destroyed by the fascist movement, so that we save the farmers and the farmers unions and everything. So that purpose, we support now this decide that movement against the central government, mainly the fascist movement. But apart from that, we must educate and explain the class, the orientation to the people and Kisan units. And CPML, AIKM also do that. So now, in this condition, you never oppose the Kap Panchayat, that is the decide, BKU, the Bharat Kisan Union, you never to oppose, never at this time, because the main enemy nowadays, this is the first enemy is Modi, not there is a government, it is the best anti-Modi position. So that must be done by the Indian people. So that purpose, we support this Digite movement, and but it is not a progressive. It's really this completely oppress the poor people and at the same time this Dalits. So you don't speak about this class variations and the struggle was only, it's not a class struggle, but you say that in Tanjore meeting, I delivered the speech, this is a class struggle. But poor people, Dalits, should not accompany in this movement. Most of the Dalits and the poor patients are out of this struggle. So nowadays, the rich patients and middle patients, they are assembled in Delhi and fight against this central governments. This is the opposition, but you must know this class divisions and the class struggle, how to the class struggle will be carried out in future by educate the people, to educate the people, the poor people and Dalits, and at the same time the BC, the demands should be demanded, should be delivered from the Kishan Union, that should be divide the backward community by class demands, not caste. That's it.
So it's like a united front then. United front with the rich peasants against the fascist element. That's your position. Is that right? Am I understanding it right?
United, what do you
About
say?
united front, kind of
Uh,
kind of how Lenin in the democratic stage of revolution had included all peasants as part of Bolshevik alliance. So because the struggle was against, in that case, feudal and element, feudalism as well as imperialist capitalism. So it's a similar thing. You see that here it's a democratic stage of movement or democratic stage of struggle. Is that right? Am I understanding your position correctly?
the leader should be when you form the United Front, the left is as a leader, not the rich peasants or Kap Panchayat. The leadership, I told that the Kisan Sabha or the Kisan Union have an idea of class divisions and class how to make the class struggle. But united front, the leadership is the main question. When the leadership of Kisan Union, that is right up. But when the leadership of Khap Panchayat or rich person, that is very damaged the demands of the poor patients and the Dalit patients. They never to bother about the demands of Dalit and poor. And the Kisan Union, then only they must be have the idea of to uplift the poor peasants and Dalits, so that Kisan Union, I say that there's left ideas in the topmost. Otherwise, it will break the struggle, and at the same time, when you succeed with the demand of rich peasants, what about the demand of the land? And so I am asking that MSP, why you bother about this MSP to Dalits? That is landless. The MSP is only for rich persons, not
Yes.
for Dalits. So the leadership is the main question. When you give the movement to the Cap Panchayat, there is very danger. So leadership is important. The leadership is must be left oriented. Otherwise, it will give a very much damage to the future plans and demands of the poor and Dalit people. That's all.
Thank you.
So United Front, just you say that United Front is not opposed my views, but the United Front must be led by a left movement or left ideas. Otherwise, it is very dangerous.
So you're saying United Front, you're not with the Khap Panchayat, but with other groups like CPIM, with whom you are united, right, in this struggle, in this particular struggle.
Yes, they are also doing. They are also doing the CPIM and CPI and CPIML. They are all the Kishan Sabhas, and they are all mingled in this struggle. And but they are not in the scenario. But the leadership was led by association comprised by some cop and rich peasants, and they have no idea of left ideas and left that is about the class divisions and the Dalit welfare or poor peasants welfare. They only fight for their own demands. Their own demands, but the MSP should be in law. It should be in law must be they are asking the main thing. So the demand is only for their own demands. That, but the demand of Dalits and poor peasants is apart from that. So that demand should be carried out by only the left movements and the left ideas. The CPA, CPM, and CPM they are trying, but they not capture in the leadership. So they are trying and they support. In the process, it will do. Then process it will come a positive side.
Okay, thank you.